Today on LA Currents, this council member has a long history with Conservancy and is ready to preserve the history, the architecture, and the cultural narrative in his district. Next, he's a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the U.S. representative for California's 34th District, and the proud son of immigrant parents. But first, 25,000 new housing units by 2025. Can it be done? Councilmember Kevin de León is on the fast track to rebuild the system and create a path for permanent supportive housing through his new A Way Home initiative.
There are many important issues affecting residents in Council District 14, and joining us to discuss some of these issues is the man who represents that area, City Councilman Kevin de León. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so let's get started. In July, the City Council passed an ordinance that would restrict encampments. What is happening with that law?
That ordinance is 41.18, and I think it comes from a lot of frustration from a lot of Angelenos, voters throughout the city of LA, of all the major encampments, the trash that has built up throughout the city of LA. So just recently, we just finalized some of the last regulations of 41.18, and quite frankly, it's very simple, straightforward. You can't have an encampment in front of a school, a nursery, a daycare center, in front of a library. It's just that simple. But I want to be very clear because it's very important. When we talk about enforcement, it simply doesn't work if you don't have the housing. Because what we can't do, and I know some folks would like to, but you can't criminalize and jail individuals because they're poor, or because they have a drug addiction, or because of the color of their skin, or because they have a severe mental illness. That doesn't work. In fact, at the end of the day, it wastes tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers. What we just did recently in the 90032, which is El Sereno neighborhood in City 14, is we had an encampment of over 100 individuals on the medium of Huntington Drive, which is on your way to Alhambra. It's in the farthest corner of Northeast LA. And what we did, my staff working with LASA and other community-based organizations, we did like a really intensive outreach. Didn't need the LAPD. We did a lot of outreach. We acquired 2 motels. We converted them quickly to home key hotels. And we went and we spoke with every single individual that was there. And we said, listen, we can give you a warm blanket. We can give you warm, clean towels. You can have your own little mini refrigerator, a television set. You can have your own remote control where you can watch the Dodgers or the Lakers. You know, you can have an HVAC system. So
you got them housed.
Got them housed. You can have, more importantly, a locked door for your own protection and safety. And we got the vast majority of them. In fact, 98, 99% of them said yes, unequivocally. So when you're going to do enforcement, you need housing. Without housing enforcement, we're just having a dog chase its tail, criminalizing folks, which we shouldn't be doing. In fact, we have a U.S. federal judge has said very clearly, you can do it. So that's what 4118 is. Not in front of schools, daycare centers, nurseries, in front of the entrance of a library.
You represent Skid Row, and a lot of the services are concentrated in that area. That is a big part of why there are so many homeless people there. I recently spent a day on Skid Row, and what I saw was extremely troubling. My photographer and I documented some of what we saw. Let's take a look.
You need a place to stay tonight? I can get you into the mission today.
What mission?
The Union Rescue. They'll take women in, no questions asked.
Oh, no, I don't like the way it smells in there.
It's the start of Senior Lead Officer Dion Joseph's patrol around the LAPD Central Division and Skid Row.
This is me engaging in what's called high visibility patrol. And when I get to one of those hot spots, I'll park my car and I'll stay there and I'll get out and walk the area. And that's called the sit down technique. That's what I call the sit down, where I sit down on a block to kind of deter the crime so the people that really need help, that want to come to me for help, they'll come. You can't be in the street like that, brother. You can't be in the street.
Scenes like this play out over and over as we ride along in his LAPD squad car. Skid Row covers a 50-block area in downtown LA. It's home to about 4,700 people on the streets and in shelters. That's according to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. What did you give?
I gave a hygiene kit to a woman who I believe needs some help.
Known on the streets as the Angel Cop, Officer Joseph hands out hygiene kits paid for by members of his church. 40% of the people on Skid Row are women, and Officer Joseph tells us 2/3 of them have been sexually assaulted at least twice.
Ma'am, please cover up.
We spot a woman walking down a busy street who's nude from the waist down.
This is a systemic failure that they've made us the tip of the spear for. And I've been calling and begging for more proactive outreach to people just like that. But under the law, she's not killing anybody. We can't help her.
So what do you think of some of the things we just saw?
I think it's accurate 100%. It is outrageous, and that's why for me, for a lot of elected officials at every level of government, it's become white noise, or when they see it for the very first time, they're absolutely astonished, you know. But let's be real. This has been going on for years, if not decades, and the reason why it's the #1 issue in the city, in the region, in the state of California is because it's hemorrhaged outside of the safety confines of Skid Row. Now we see encampments in almost every neighborhood. Historically, the hot spots for homelessness has been Skid Row, it's been the streets of Hollywood, and it's been Venice Beach. But now we see encampments in every neighborhood in the Valley, in Mid and West LA, in South LA especially, and in Boyle Heights. Well, historically, we've had neighborhoods that have had their struggles, but they've never had large, homeless encampments, that have bled from Caltrans properties adjacent to highways right into neighborhoods and into parks. So to me, it is the largest humanitarian crisis that this city is facing and has faced in a very, very long time. So to me, it's all hands on deck. Last August, the council has approved my plan called A Way Home, which is 25,000 housing units by the year 2025, because ultimately enforcement, issues of mental illnesses, sexual assaults, horrific that women of color, women at the lowest economic strata who have been marginalized or vulnerable on any given night in the city of LA, and this happens 24/7. So we should collectively be outraged. The good thing is it doesn't make a difference if you're a Democrat or Republican or points in between. Angelenos want immediate action, but we have to be very smart because we have spent tens of millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and the desired outcomes that we wish to have not really come to fruition. The city of LA has 41,000 apartments, luxury market rate surplus. We have 41,000 individuals who are homeless in the city of LA. That's upside down. And we have to put our priorities straight in LA for all Angelenos, whether you live in Woodland Hills, Winnetka, Westchester, or Encino, or East LA, South LA, or Sherman Oaks. We're in this together. By the end of this month, September, I'll have the largest tiny home village community in the United States of America, right off the 110 freeway, Arroyo Seco, in Highland Park. 60 square feet, you have a locked door, you have an HVAC system, you have your own bed, you have a light. If it gets too hot, guess what? You can put on air conditioning. They'll have bathrooms, they'll have showers, they'll have 3 meals served to them a day. You'll have 24/7 security. It's short term. It's not the panacea to the big structural issues, because when we're not dealing with macroeconomic issues out of Washington, D.C. that drive people into poverty, and all of a sudden members of the council, our mayor Eric Garcetti, sort of kind of left holding the bag to deal with this crisis. That's why I say it's all hands on deck. But tiny shelters, I think, are for the immediate. I know some folks want the perfect. We can't let the perfect get in the way of the good, because we have 4 Angelenos who die on our streets every single day. In fact, just last year, you had 1,383 Angelenos who lost their lives on the streets of the city and county of Los Angeles. That's one too many.
Do you know how many units will be in the tiny home village?
We'll have about 100 units. That is 2 individuals per unit. There's 2 beds per unit. There'll be a total of over 200 individuals. Also, too, we're building tiny cabin shelter units on the corner a little north of Colorado and Figueroa, up northeast for the Eagle Rock community, where we have a growing, unhoused community as well, too.
Well, this has been a lively discussion. Would you agree?
It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank
I hope to do it again.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Councilman Kevin de León.
Next, we get a lesson in Historic Cultural Monument designation from Councilmember Gil Cedillo, who shares his passion for and the significance of supporting local Latino landmarks.
The city is a very special place, a city of immigrants, special place in the world. But what's important is that the history of this city be memorialized, and one of the ways this happens is through historic preservation. I want the people of Los Angeles to know that this was where it happened. This was the Mecca. This is where the Chicano movement emerged from. It's an incredible social, artistic, and cultural contribution to the city, and so it's important for us to preserve our history. Architecture contains the social movements that are part of it.
It's nice to have the area of Concilio de Arte Popular designated as a historical monument. We were the first Latinos, Chicanos, to have a show at LACMA.
These artists have global status. Their work is admired throughout the world. We should preserve the buildings and the art for public appreciation.
Nationally, less than 10% of historic sites and historic landmarks are associated with communities of color, and especially places that were historically significant in the Chicano movement, the Latino movement for civil rights.
Change is constant in life, and so the challenges for governance is how we provide leadership, how we guide that change to have a progressive result, a humanitarian result, an egalitarian result. And the preservation of these buildings, the acknowledgement of the art that was created in these buildings is part of that contribution.
Councilmember Gil Cedillo, he values Chicano history very much, and he recognized how important this is. So letting your elected officials know that this as a community is important to you can really help further the advancement of the preservation of history in your community. Highland Park is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Los Angeles.
There's so much interest in Highland Park these days, and I always sort of knew it as sort of a deteriorating community, and now I guess there's a renaissance. There's a lot of businesses were opening up, and then COVID happened, but it will be a thriving community again.
There's tons and tons of different places that are very significant to the city of Los Angeles and even nationally. We are home to national historic landmarks like the Lummis Home. We're home to the Southwest Museum. We have a lot of beautiful murals here that are also being worked on, being protected and nominated as HCM Historic Cultural Monuments as well. And of course, we have the people and the legacy businesses that have been around for a very long time.
I think it's perfect opportunity for Chicanos to recognize that there is a Chicano art history. We're proud to have been able to start a renaissance, so to speak, for the few years that we were in Highland Park that produced works like this.
you know, there were all these rival Chicano art groups around, like Chicano and you know, various Chicano arts groups, and we kept saying, you know, we should do something, you know, we should organize. And what we came up with, we wanted something bicultural, bilingual. And I came up with the name Los Four, and it stuck. It all started as a spontaneous phenomena. You know, everyone says, who's first? Judy Baca or the art teacher at East LA College was the very first muralist, but we all did murals in the 60s. We would just go to an owner of a building and say, I like that wall, here's a sketch, can we do a mural? And they said, okay, go ahead. So murals all over East LA.
We're talking about collectives of artists who came together in order to share resources and create art that they could share with the community and with the world, and create a space in a time where their art and their work was not welcome and their opportunities were not equal to others the way they should have been.
Well, let me tell you, we should be, as Angelenos, extraordinarily proud of the work that took place. The work of all these artists are gems of the city of Los Angeles. And they are at the highest standards of excellence. People from the world come. And when they come, they want to see the Chicano artists. They want to see the Chicanada. They want to see these incredible muralists who emulated the great muralists of Mexico from the 20s and the 30s. The Orozcos, the Siqueiros, the Tamayos, the Diego Riveras, the Frida Kahlos, etc., etc.
We're putting out examples of artwork that reflected the barrio or reflected the international struggles from an artistic viewpoint. Not much radical politics, but we're trying to bring bridges. We need to have strong institutions for Chicanos to recognize their history along with contemporaries.
Through this type of preservation, this is how the city knows how to go forward. This gives us guidance and direction in going forward.
It was one of the great period of time for Chicano artists to come together. What's lacking is that we don't have centers anymore. Very few. We need places where we can sit down and have a cup of coffee, drink a little bit of beer, and talk about art. We really, really lack that opportunity.
I've been a big proponent of historic preservation. We saved the Breed Street Shoal in Boyle Heights. We saved the Chinese Museum in Chinatown. We saved St. Viviana's downtown, the historic St. Viviana's. And so it's important for us to preserve our history and not allow us to be erased, as the young people like to say. We will not be erased.
Next, he stood up for LGBTQ rights and paid family leave. We talk with Congressman Jimmy Gomez about the past that shaped him and his outlook for a better tomorrow.
Congratulations, you are now a member of the 115th Congress.
I'm delighted today to be joined by Congressman Jimmy Gomez. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Your road to Congress is fascinating for a number of reasons. I mean, you're the child of immigrant parents. You watched your parents work really, really hard to make ends meet. So what did you see and what did you hear and what were you taught that thought, okay, I can do this. I can be a public servant and I may be able to affect change?
Yeah, first, my parents were from Mexico. My dad actually came here as a bracero, worked in the fields. It was a program for farm workers back in the 40s and the 50s. He came in the late 50s. He was like one of the last cohorts to come out here.
Braceros. In Spanish, this means a man who works with his arms and hands.
It wasn't like Ozzie and Harriet where we sit around the table and they would give us a lecture of what we should learn from. It was more like setting an example. You work hard, you take care of your family, you make sure that you're doing well by your community, and you give to people who have less than you.
Are you folks proud?
Yeah, they're definitely proud. My dad passed away. He wasn't around to see it, but he was always proud of it for him. And then my mom was, she's always been proud, no matter what I did. That's, I think, what made them great parents. They didn't care if I became an elected official or if I worked at a job where I was just taking care of my family. They would have been proud either way.
So are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling positive? Are you feeling as if we're moving in a good direction and that government is efficiently working or has the potential to?
Yeah, I do feel optimistic when it comes to different things that we've done. You have to make different decisions if you want different results. And during the American Rescue Plan, we passed an expanded monthly child tax credit. And it ranges anywhere from $250 to $300 per child per month. That one bill, that one piece of legislation is cutting child poverty anywhere from 45% to 61% in this country. One policy change. So policy can work if you make different decisions when you're shaping that policy. Who is it going to help? Who is it going to impact? And does it work? How are you going to implement it? So I am hopeful that people are seeing the results of what we're trying to do that will lead us to make better decisions when it comes to housing, homelessness, climate change, education, where we target resources so that we can get a bigger return on our hard-earned tax dollars.
Well, I'll jump to money to communities because actually you just secured funding for 10 community projects in your district. And the total was over $11 million, which is a goodly amount of funding that is going to help these community efforts. So what were the projects and how will they help District 34?
No, great question. So there's two parts, right? The community funding projects were the appropriation earmarks, and then the Vest in America Act that included $20 million that I secured. So $5 million is for the LA Union Station to help with the high-speed rail redesign of the line. So there's projects on transportation that are getting included in the infrastructure package, and then there's these community funding plans. These are just everything that our district needs: housing, combating climate change. We got $3.6 million for the engineering necessary for the LA River to restore that. We got money for Boyle Heights to do urban greening and cooling, cool pavement. So it's so we got a lot of great projects, and then investing in our students from disadvantaged backgrounds, having them have counselors through Para los Niños, as well as Project SOARS that operate in some of the government housing. We ended up getting also $1 million for Highland Park Arts Center, and this is turning an old armory into an art center, matching with Prop K funds that had been on the books for a while, just needed the extra money to start the program. I'm proud of those projects. We had 110 submissions, but each member of Congress can only select 10 and submit those 10.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's highly, and it's highly complex, obviously, you know, the way it's all managed in regards to federal funds that help local areas. But you're also very outspoken about a couple of other issues in regards to general health and welfare. You were very much a part of lauding the federal eviction moratorium.
Yeah.
And that demonstrated that it was very important to you. What are those things that are important to you?
The pandemic just showed, I think in stark terms, what a lot of people already knew, that there is a big wealth disparity in this country, there's an opportunity disparity in this country, and that we have to take steps to actively combat it. You know, who was getting infected more? Those people who were working class backgrounds that had to go into work, that had no choice but to go into work to support their family. It was immigrants, it was Latinos, it was African Americans. Those were disproportionately getting the coronavirus and dying from it. Additionally, they're the ones that were also losing their jobs, struggling. So the eviction moratorium, we were fighting for, first, rent relief last year in the HEROES Act. We got it in the appropriations, $25 billion in the December appropriations. Means that it was going to go out to help people stay in their homes. We also passed another $25 billion, roughly, in the American Rescue Plan in March once Joe Biden became president. That allows us to, good example, City of LA, $243 million in rent relief. That's on top of the $100 million they used from the CARES Act the federal government passed last year. So keeping people in their homes is number one. If you don't, you're just gonna have more people living on the streets, and then trying to deal with that problem on the street level is gonna be more difficult. So I'm proud that the local officials passed an eviction moratorium extension on their own. However, the federal eviction moratorium was being challenged by the realtors and different folks. And if they would have succeeded and we didn't expand it, they would have came after the local and the state. So they go hand in hand. And
short it up.
Yeah, so we were fighting for every eviction moratorium extension since myself, Ayanna Pressley, Corey Bush, different folks, because we know what it would mean for working families. When it's going to impact my constituents or the people, I'm going to fight for them. We ended up spending the nights on the steps of the Capitol to bring attention to the issue. I stayed with Corey Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, and we just made an argument that the president had the authority. He just needed to find the new justification to do it, which he ended up doing and extending it. So it was a big win.
Included in, some of your interests is this transit to trails.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, and just getting out of your close-knit environment and have an opportunity to see things outside of your realm that might be inspiring from a natural standpoint. How did that come about?
Well, growing up, I grew up in Riverside, and when we go on trips, we didn't go on vacations like a traditional family because we didn't have the money. We would go, if we went to Mexico, it was in the back of a pickup truck, and my dad would drive all the way to his hometown, and that's how we'd get there. But going to a national park where they had an entrance fee was always a barrier, because are you going to spend that $5 or $10 on the entrance fee, or are you going to spend it on food, on tortillas and beans or eggs for your family, right? So it's a matter of making decisions. I always wanted to go to these national parks. And that's something that kind of sat with me. So coming up with the Transit to Trails Act was about how do you give people from urban areas or disadvantaged communities that don't necessarily have the resources or the transportation to visit our public lands and our national parks, how do you give them access? So this bill, the Transit to Trails, what Cory Booker introduced in the Senate, would allow to create a federal grant program for communities and nonprofits to apply for the grant so that they can take kids from the urban centers to the parks or to the public lands. There's programs out there like that, but not to the scale that we need so that people can see what's beyond their front door or their neighborhood. And when you do that, it's about showing them that there are opportunities beyond their neighborhoods, right? To experience that part of America or to experience something else. So Transit to Trails is to kind of open people's imagination and perspective while giving them a place to recreate and enjoy the outdoors.